you ever seen something that had no explanation, and when you tried to tell people about it, no one believed you? In that moment, you probably wished you had a camera in your hand so you could record what you were seeing and show people proof that it really happened. But believe me, before we start today's video, I have a small request. Please support the channel with a like, a subscription, and a comment. That's the biggest support you can give us, and what helps us continue making content. Thank you very much to everyone who supports us, whether with a like, a share, or a comment. Now, let's start today's video. Saw was something no one would ever believe. If it weren't for the surveillance camera in my car, no one would have believed me. A few weeks ago, I got a new job, and I was happy because the salary was better and it matched my skills more. The only problem was that it was much farther from my house than my old job. I also finished work after sunset, right when the sun started to disappear. At first, I didn't really pay attention to that because the benefits were good, and I've never had a problem driving at night on highways. But my wife, who was 4 or 5 months pregnant at the time, was very worried about me driving so late. To reassure her, I installed a dash cam in my car to record everything that happens while I'm driving. The days passed without any problems until Tuesday of the second week at my new job. That day, things took a terrifying turn. That day, I finished work a little later than usual. Soon after leaving, my wife called me. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm on my way home now," I told her. Night had already fallen when I walked to my car, which was parked under a streetlight. I just wanted to get home as quickly as possible so my wife wouldn't worry about me. I turned on the car lights. Even though the lights from nearby shops and restaurants were already bright enough, I knew that after a short distance, the road would become dark and isolated. I started driving and soon left the town. Little by little, the buildings disappeared and were replaced by trees and grass. The light became weaker. Even though there were streetlights along the road, they barely made a difference in the darkness. I knew this road well because I had driven on it all week. It was usually empty, which is why I was surprised when I saw a car ahead of me. The red lights from the car helped me judge the distance so I didn't get too close. Then I noticed the car ahead was slowing down. Suddenly, I saw someone standing in the middle of the road. I barely avoided hitting him. As soon as I swerved past him, I slammed on my brakes. At that moment, I understood why the car ahead had slowed down. My heart was racing. My thoughts were all over the place. I couldn't keep driving like that. Why would someone be standing in the middle of the road at night? I had only seen him for a few seconds, but I was certain of one thing. The person had no arms. His features also looked blurred and strange. To make sure I wasn't imagining things, I looked in the rearview mirror. He was still standing there, completely motionless. That made me even more uncomfortable. Even though I was scared, I decided to get out of the car. I told myself that maybe the man needed help. Maybe he was waiting for someone to pick him up. On a road like this, it would be very hard to find a passing car. A lot of thoughts ran through my mind, but in the end, I decided I had to help him. I turned off the car, took the keys, opened the door, and stepped out. I was still cautious. It could have been some kind of prank, or maybe a trap to rob me. I walked towards the man who was standing near a streetlight so I could see him more clearly. I could only see his back, and I still wasn't sure whether he really had arms or not. "Excuse me?" No response. "Are you okay? Do you need help? Are you hurt? I have a phone. You can call someone if you want." This time, the man moved slightly. I wasn't sure what that meant, but at least he seemed to respond. "Look, I don't usually do this, but I'm on my way home. It's not far from here. I can give you a ride if you want." Before I could finish, A strange sound came from him. It sounded like he wanted to speak, but couldn't. Suddenly, the man started shaking violently. "What's wrong with you?" I shouted. Then he turned his face towards me. The moment I saw his face, I felt like my heart stopped. His whole body was trembling, and I started sweating. The man had no face. Where his eyebrows, nose, and lips should have been, there were only wounds. The only visible features were 2 holes where his nose should be so he could breathe. It looked like everything else had been cut off and burned away. He kept shaking and making painful groaning sounds, like he wanted to say something, but couldn't. He couldn't even touch anything, because he had no arms. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't move. Suddenly, he ran towards the forest. I tried to call him out and warn him that he would run into the trees ahead, but he didn't stop. His shoulder slammed into a tree trunk. Another strange groaning sound came from him. Then he pulled his head back and slammed it hard against the tree. Again and again, he kept smashing his face into the tree. I tried to calm him down. I didn't think he would hear me, but when I started shouting, he stopped and turned his head towards me. His burned face was now covered in bruises and blood. Then he moved again and ran deeper into the forest until he disappeared. Once he was gone, I was finally able to move. The whole situation had shaken me so badly that I started vomiting. After that, I returned to my car. I noticed many missed calls from my wife. When I got home, I told her everything that had happened and even showed her the recording from the dash cam. But despite that, she didn't believe me. She tried to calm me down and said, "Relax, you're home now." It was probably just some stupid prank. As much as I wanted to believe it was a prank, I knew she was wrong. I knew what I had seen. Since that night, I haven't been able to sleep. Every night I have nightmares about that faceless man. It got so bad that I started seeing things even when I was awake. I kept asking myself who could commit such a horrible crime on a human being. I started searching through missing persons lists, but how could I recognize him when he had no face? I turned the car back on and continued driving, but the moment the engine started, I felt something had changed. It wasn't just that the car felt heavier to drive. My own chest felt tight, and I had this horrible, unexplainable feeling. I kept thinking about the deer I had just seen. I was certain I had tried to avoid it. I've been in situations like this before, but this time was different. The deer wasn't actually hit by the car. And the question that haunted me even more, how did the deer end up at the side of the road like that? My mind was spinning with questions, and unfortunately, the answer turned out to be closer than I could have imagined. I looked in the car's rearview mirror to check that everything was okay, but what I saw instead made my blood run cold. My own face appeared, staring down at me from the top of the car. Its sharp, terrifying eyes were fixed on me, and it was holding on to the roof with huge arms that didn't look human at all. The moment I realized what I was seeing, I didn't wait a second. It reached a hand through the window and tried to attack me. I barely managed to dodge it at the last moment, but the car spun out of control and slid into the mud on the side of the road. The creature jumped and landed in the bushes ahead, disappearing from my view. I quickly restarted the car, but before I could back up, I saw it again. It was moving through the shrubs in a strange, inhuman way, almost like an animal walking on its hands and feet. Anyone else would have thought they were seeing a monster, but my mind immediately went back to what I had studied in medical school. Its arms and legs were completely disproportionate to its body. It was unnaturally long, and its limbs were horrifyingly large. That's when I realized this wasn't a monster, it was a human, but someone with Marfan syndrome. I tried to reverse the car and escape, but at that moment, I heard the same sound I'd heard when I first saw the dead animal. Everything became clear. The noise I'd heard wasn't the deer hitting the car. The deer had already been dead at the side of the road. That sound came from this person jumping on the roof of my car. As soon as I realized what was happening, I scrambled to close the driver's side window before its hand could get in. I didn't manage in time, and when I looked at the passenger window, it was open and the creature was still reaching through to grab it. Suddenly, it appeared right in front of me. Its face was inches from mine, separated only by the thin glass. It started licking the window in a disgusting, almost playful way. Seconds later, it got angry and started violently banging on the glass, then ran around the car. I was frozen, unsure of what to do. I realized I might not escape this person. It was hitting the roof with all its strength. I tried starting the car to get back to the road, but it stalled in the middle of the path. The repeated impacts had clearly damaged it, and I thought to myself that this might be the end. What was supposed to be a fun trip to see my family had turned into a nightmare. I was on a deserted road, facing someone completely deranged, and my life was in danger for no clear reason. Then, the rearview mirror gave me a glimmer of hope. I saw headlights slowly approaching from a distance, my only chance, since it was rare to see another car on this road. I revved the engine with all my strength. The sound distracted the creature, and I seized the opportunity, opened the door, and ran at full speed. I turned my head mid-run and saw it chasing me. This time it wasn't moving like before on all fours. It was standing on its legs, unnaturally tall, moving its arms up and down in a strange way. It reached me, grabbed my hair, and tried to drag me into a dark place away from the road. I grabbed a brick from the ground and hit it as hard as I could in the legs. It screamed in pain and released me. I ran back to the car, jumped in, and drove across the road to safety. "Please, I need help. Get me out of here," I yelled to the driver of another car. He looked at me and said, "Looks like you had a rough night." I got in and told him everything. I explained that someone had attempted to abduct me. Thankfully, he didn't seem dangerous, and he dropped me near the city. The next day, I reported everything to the police. They confirmed that a mentally unstable person had attempted to attack me. When we went to retrieve my car, it was completely destroyed, along with the rest of my belongings. But the story stayed in my mind. I started investigating the area and eventually discovered that there was a psychiatric hospital on the outskirts of the town. There, they had been performing horrifying experiments on patients. The patients suffered extreme psychological trauma, but one day, all of them managed to escape. Life conditions there were so terrible that no one cared for them. Anyone who entered that hospital rarely came out, which made the place extremely dangerous. I also learned that families didn't visit their relatives there, and the staff treated patients with brutal cruelty. The man who attacked me that night seemed like a monster, an animal, or some strange creature, but in reality, he wasn't. He was a patient from that hospital. Because of what he had been through, he had become terrifying over time. Once I realized this, I felt some pity for him. He wasn't a monster. He was a victim of horrific experiments conducted by deranged people. After leaving the restaurant job I had promised myself I would never work in another kitchen. I had spent years standing in kitchens, cooking for people, often for customers who didn't even tip properly. I had decided to quit, but with my mother's exhaustion and the hospital bills piling up, I didn't have the energy to refuse work in restaurants. I accepted the first job that came, paid in cash, quickly, with no questions. I found an ad on a closed forum. They were looking for a specialized chef, no license required, high pay, and very demanding skills. I contacted them, and they gave me the address. When I drove to the location, it was underground, with massive ovens, blood-stained tiles, and vacuum-sealed bags piled up in the cold storage room. A man in a suit handed me instructions without saying a word or giving his name. Cook what's in the bags, take pictures of everything, and leave before midnight. That first night, I made $5,000, but I knew the meat I was cooking wasn't beef, no matter how well I cut it or how much sauce I added. There was something about its texture, color, and tenderness. It was different. It was the meat of an animal, but not a cow. Something felt wrong. The client told me this was a rare type of meat, and that word kept ringing in my ears like a warning. I didn't take the warning seriously at the time. I told myself it didn't matter. I was cooking so my mom could stay alive. If I didn't take this job, someone else would, and honestly, the pay was tempting. I stopped asking questions and started putting more of my personal touches into the dishes, doing everything professionally. After a while, they asked me to film myself while cooking. They sent cameras, microphones, everything I needed for filming. I don't know who was watching these videos, but it was clear it wasn't just for one client. They were collecting the footage, building some kind of archive. A month later, my pay doubled. One day, I went to work and found a bag waiting for me, but it wasn't like before. Each bag had no label, just a small note saying the pieces were fresh. The first thing I noticed when I opened the bag was how warm it was. Steam was rising from inside. When I unwrapped it, I saw the veins were still full of blood. The pieces weren't prepared properly, and half of the skin was peeling. The person preparing it had rushed. There was no smell of rot or dried out joints. This was a human body, freshly cut within the last hour or less. I didn't know his name, but he was wearing a bracelet on his wrist. I shut off the lights and sat on the floor, trying to compose myself and process what was happening. That's when I realized these weren't just meals or rare meat dishes I was preparing. I was doing something illegal. I was part of a gang. I wasn't a cook anymore. I was part of the process, part of the crime. The whole time, someone was watching me from a corner of the kitchen. There were cameras with small red lights. I unplugged the cable and walked away, leaving everything behind. The next morning, I returned to find the kitchen completely cleaned. A note was taped to the door with a smiley face and 3 words. I hesitated, but later that day, my sister called me crying. She told me our mother had fallen into a coma. The hospital said they didn't know who was paying the bills, but the account was fully paid by someone. That night, I took the next job without thinking. I told them to send whatever they needed, and I'd finish it quickly. But this time, they didn't send meat. They sent a photo of a man in his 30s. He was alive. He wasn't a corpse like the last one. The note said, "Start from the legs, deliver on site." That's when I understood what they needed from me. They wanted me to take care of this person. Myself, I waited in front of his apartment for 2 hours, sitting in the car, gripping the steering wheel tightly. There were no getaway cars, no assistance, just me. Time moved slowly. The street was quiet. I got out of the car and walked toward the door. The door was open. Inside, the place was strangely clean. There were family photos on shelves. I walked down the hall to the room and found him on the floor. His shoulders were restrained behind his back, tape over his mouth, his face swollen as if beaten brutally. He looked at me with his eyes. He wasn't crying, he was angry. Then I noticed the cameras. 2 on the walls and a drone charging nearby. This wasn't his home. This was a setup, a studio designed specifically for the work. The silence was suffocating. I grabbed the scalpel they had left beside him. My hands were sweaty and shaking. I told him I was sorry, and I started stabbing. Blood sprayed everywhere, on the carpet, on the walls, but he didn't die easily. He kept convulsing, and I held him down until finally he went still. I looked at the cameras and shook my head. They wanted to watch this moment. 3 days later, a flash drive arrived with the full video, slow motion shots, music, the sound of boiling oil, and the plating of the dish. The file name was Episode 13, Chef Reggie Returns. At that point, I realized I was the star of their videos. Seeing the first one made my stomach turn. I grabbed the flash drive and burned it immediately. But that night, another USB arrived, perfectly arranged with the letters of my first name and a small note: "If you stop cooking the next dish, it will be your sister." From that moment, I went back to cooking. I prepared the bodies that arrived in boxes, tied up and broken. Each job was worse than the last. The clients wanted every reaction filmed. The moment the fire touched the skin, I didn't sleep, I didn't speak. I just worked until one day an empty box arrived. But inside was a photo of me, taken from outside my room 3 hours earlier. A comment was attached: "We're bored with the same recipes. Your next dish." I spent 2 days hiding in my apartment, closing the windows, cutting the electricity, turning off my phone. But I knew it was useless. They were inside anyway. After a while, the doorbell rang. I couldn't move. I stayed silent, listening to my heavy, shaky breaths. The bell stopped. 10 minutes later, slow, steady knocks began on the door. Then I saw a plastic envelope slide under the door. I opened it. Inside was a photo of my sister, tied to a chair, gagged, crying. I tried calling her, but the line was dead. I gathered my things and walked to the address they sent. The place was in the woods, a small single-story house. I went inside. Strangely, the house smelled clean, as if freshly sanitized. There was a single camera, a table set up with a dish covered. I lifted the cover and saw a tongue, still soft, and a bill with the words, "Chef Reggie, main course." I realized they had been preparing me from the start. I ran for the door. It was locked. All the windows were barred. The ventilation grate above opened, and gas started pouring in. My eyes burned. I fell to the floor, and before losing consciousness, I saw a red light on the camera. They were live streaming. I woke up tied to a metal table, shirtless, with a man wearing a chef's hat covering me. The cameras were all focused on me. I screamed and tried to call for help, but they didn't touch me. It was a warning. Then I passed out again. When I woke, I was in another room. My body was unharmed. They wanted to show me they were in control and that I had to keep fulfilling their requests. They moved me to a new kitchen, new knives, but the rules were the same. Now I'm taken to different locations, cooking whatever they send. Sometimes it's a bound, crying woman. I continue without questioning or refusing anything. My mother is hooked up to machines. My sister is locked in a windowless room. They are still alive because I cook. If I stop, they die. That's the agreement. And it's still in place today.